everybody, and we have to educate people about it. And so that's what heartens me, and that's what keeps me going in this new paradigm, is that I truly believe that cannabis can be for everyone. And so we have to just kind of make that happen and really make it the rising tide that lifts all boats instead of just a few big corporate boats. So that's what we have to keep working to make that happen.
So I work specifically with women entrepreneurs in cannabis, but I'm also very committed to women consumers. And the reality about the future of cannabis is that women over 40 are going to drive this industry. It's not going to be the people who are interested in just getting high in the rec market. It's going to be people who now feel the walls have come down enough that I can approach this medicine. Women make 92% of the buying decisions in the household when it comes to healthcare, yet 66% of them feel misunderstood by the healthcare industry. I believe that it is the responsibility of this industry to make it available and comfortable for older women to walk into dispensaries and feel that they are not being rushed, to feel that they can ask questions, to feel that they can sample, to feel that they can act and integrate with this medicine in a way that is not overwhelming or intimidating. And frankly, I don't see many places anywhere where women can, my mother-in-law, who's 86 years old, can feel comfortable walking in and spend an hour asking questions. So I think that we really need to understand the role that women play in making these kinds of decisions in our households and in our society, and that we really work to make them feel comfortable and accepted and understand, yes, there are specific women issues, but women take oftentimes the responsibility in our homes for all of the healthcare issues. So how do we educate them and make them feel welcome in the industry? And there are interesting issues that many of them have to deal with. A lot of the baby boomers who are now approaching the medicine also have to deal with the guilt that they have for punishing their kids ruthlessly for using it when they were teenagers, or overcoming the conditioning that they've had dealing with an illegal substance that's now legal. So we have a lot of work to do in the industry to invite and welcome the portion of this country that really, as we move closer to federal legalization, will be driving and dominating financially this industry. The other piece of it too is that our generation is really the first that gets to age with cannabis. And as we enter into a space where there's more research happening, like in Canada and Israel, we're just at 1% of the scientific understanding of the possibility and capabilities of this plant. So supporting scientific research, supporting legislation that allows us to really get to understand the medical benefits, because we know this much about what this plant can do for us as a medicine. So my focus is really on ensuring that the industry is aware of the fact that we have an entire segment of this population that really, really needs to be welcomed. Not just educated, but we need to create environments where you feel welcome to walk through that door. The other piece of it is about the education. There's a group of women that have started an organization called Elementa. And what they have done is seen there's this need to educate people in an environment similar to this, where it doesn't feel intimidating and overwhelming, where you can feel that you're with your peers. And so they're actually enabling women to throw these events in their local areas and bring people like us together who are curious about the medicine in a non-intimidating environment. And one thing that I do a Mentor Monday on my Facebook group, and I interview a lot of really interesting women. And I had someone on from Humboldt recently who has moved from the black market to the gray market into the regulated market. And one of the things that she said was, we're dealing with a feminine mother plant here, and she gives birth to so much creativity. And when we look at cannabis, there are no rules, there are no boundaries. It is what can we do with this to become truly creative in how we solve problems and how we educate people. And so bringing up Elementa is to say, here's a group of women who has seen a need and facilitated it and made it possible for us to do the things that we're talking about here. And so if you're interested in cannabis, there are a lot of ways that we can educate each other and start to create new experiences that will facilitate more of us having access to the medicine and understanding of what it does. So I think there's a lot of creativity that has not yet been tapped in how we can solve these problems.
Very cool.
Well, sorry, just to add to that really quickly. At Kind Peoples, we do a lot of market research, and we're seeing definitely more women interested in cannabis than ever before, and they're using it for a variety of different reasons, including as a substitute for alcohol. You know, instead of having that glass of wine or that half bottle of wine, they're choosing cannabis instead, which is a harm reduction strategy and definitely a positive benefit, as well as anti-anxiety medication. You know, women are the primary users of a lot of different pharmaceutical anti-anxiety and sleep aid, pharmaceutical medications, and we're seeing people choose cannabis instead, which I think is also a net benefit for society and something that we're doing a lot more education around.
Cool. So as industry insiders, with advocating to local government, there's still this idea that a cannabis farmer is raking in the dough, hand over fist, when the reality is the price per unit last year pretty much in half of what previous years, and that trajectory isn't slowing down. So that's just one example of how the mainstream public consciousness perceives our work in our community, and I'm sure there's many things that we can shed light on as industry insiders. So it's kind of an open-ended topic and question, but I wanted to give you that opportunity to shed light on the public.
I could speak to the delusion of local legislators that are making policy that doesn't make sense. I could speak to the delusion of the average public person, like you said, that believes that everybody's rich that's in the game. One of the most obvious examples of that is people that are trying to find space to rent that can't own property. If anybody doesn't know, Santa Cruz has relatively high property rates. In this area, it's kind of hard to own property unless you have a lot of money to start. And if you're trying to rent from landowners, they have an idea that cannabis is going to produce a ton of money, so they feel very comfortable doubling and tripling your rent, price per square foot in a place that you'd like to exist because of the extra risks or the extra whatever that might come along with the cannabis industry. So specifically, that misinformation affects us in multiple ways that are ending up affecting the bottom line and who has access to what medicine and how often they can have access to that medicine. I know a lot of people that have been shopping at dispensaries legally with their medical card for the last couple of years that have stopped shopping at dispensaries since the first, because there's A, an abundance of medicine outside the dispensary system now, and B, the dispensary system has become instantly much more expensive to shop in. Much smaller variety of products, like you said, because fewer people can jump through the hoops. The quality of the products has actually gone down because the people that can mass produce it are mass producing it instead of a small boutique hands-on product, both in edibles and in flowers and all along the line. And so that misconception, regardless of how people are getting through their everyday lives and relating to the plant, has affected everybody financially and has affected all of our livelihoods.
It's definitely an interesting dynamic. Speaking about, side hustles and the fact that literally everyone I know is working 2 or 3 or 4 jobs at this point in Santa Cruz. Cannabis for a lot of people was a side hustle that enabled them to make ends meet. And especially for a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of people in our communities in the Bay Area, that was something that enabled them to do their craft. And so we're seeing those populations impacted in a very negative way from losing those kind of, part-time work and, people who do the trimming and stuff like that. Like the marijuana plants have to be processed. And that was a very good gig to have for a lot of people.
And now they're not being able to make a living that way, and so their art is leaving our community as well.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Because they can't do their art here because they can't make ends meet here.
Yeah, and there's some weird unintended side effects of this kind of legalization on the arts community, on a lot of people who are otherwise marginalized.
That's right.
And it's going to impact our economy as a whole, and we're trying to get some numbers around that. We're trying to figure out how we can quantify the data behind how this is going to affect a lot of people who are struggling to make ends meet regardless. And for a lot of growers, especially up in the Emerald Triangle and the Santa Cruz Mountains, these are people who aren't trying to make a killing. They're just trying to make a living. They're just trying to put a little bit of a nest egg away or send their kids to college, things like that. They're not trying to become these giant businesses. They're just trying to, supplement their income. And so that's a big part of legalization. As well as it's been interesting to work at a dispensary and see how that works behind the scenes. There's some of the same misconceptions as well, that these businesses are making tons and tons of income, but there's a lot of overhead. You know, Kind People's employs 80 people in Santa Cruz County, more than that. And so the costs associated with doing this kind of business are tremendous. The taxes right now are at 30%, you know, so that's a big part of local advocacy in Santa Cruz, is that we need to make the tax rates lower so that we really can compete with the black market, because it's not going to work how it's currently set up. Most people are going to go right back to the black market because the taxes are way too high.
May I address something really
Yeah.
quick about Santa Cruz? Also in Santa Cruz, since you brought up the tax structure, cannabis, I don't know if anybody knows this, in Santa Cruz, cannabis is taxed at every single level in Santa Cruz, every single level of its production, unlike any other product on the planet. Alcohol is all in-based. Everything else, anything else that you might even associate with it, you only pay one tax at the end. In Santa Cruz, the local legislature has put a 7% tax on the cultivator for the flower on end product cost, a 7% tax on the manufacturer, a 7% tax on anybody doing any distribution, and that's before it gets to any Kind People's taxes that you were talking about, the 30%. That's in addition to any state taxes.
And
That's
it
in
should be
addition. That's in
Yeah.
addition to any excise tax. That's in addition to anything else. That is the local legislature going out of their way to disqualify people from being able to do business here. And they wonder why a lot of people haven't come up and given them their money and started paying these rates. Because it's untenable. There's no way that any business could survive being taxed at every end. I mean, Bluebelly Farms, just specifically, our experience is we've provided trim for companies like Lifted Edibles, Elevated Extracts, long-time companies. They've been made with our product. But now we have to pay on the flower, they have to pay on the manufacturing, and everything has to get paid before it even goes to you guys. A 70% tax on the end product before it even gets to the consumer. Nothing can sustain that. Nothing can sustain that.
Kira?
Well, and with 280E, I don't know how many of you in this room understand what that is, but when you have a traditional business, you can write off your employees, you can write off your business expenses. You cannot do that with cannabis.
That's right.
As a grower, you have the ability to write off a few things,
Right.
but as a dispensary or an edible maker, you cannot write off anything.
That's right.
So you pay tax on every single dollar you bring in, and then add those taxes on top of it, and your margins become minuscule. So it's very hard to actually grow a business under those conditions.
That's right.
I'm not a grower myself, but I know several growers, and I have a good friend who grows in Scotts Valley. And I had a broker in LA ask me if I could broker some cannabis from Santa Cruz that was pesticide free. And my friend quoted me a rate of $1,200 a pound, and I related that, and they came back and said, no, we're looking for pesticide free at $400 a pound. And she looked at me and she said, I'd rather burn it. Because what's happening is the larger corporations and buyers are looking to purchase flower, pull it off the market, and hold it. And she's aware that this is going on, and you know, I am not a cultivator, so I can't speak to this. I'm just sharing what she has shared with me, is that the farmers really need to stick together, and they need to create a union or something where they can determine the price, because we've seen this actually happen in agriculture already, where prices are driven down because people hold the commodity and do price gouging. So if growers can stick together, then you know it's all really about creating alliances, whether you're a grower, whether you're a product maker, whether you're whatever end of the business you're working in. I mean, delivery almost didn't even make it into state licensing. Delivery people had to band together and petition Lori Ajax to consider writing that. So we need an industry where people are really coming together and not necessarily unionizing, but creating agreements about what they will allow and won't allow their prices to be set at, so that they don't go out of business. I mean, $1,200 to $400 is it's just, you can't even do business that way, and the farmers are the ones that will lose first. So
To speak to that very briefly, if I may, one challenge that one would run into in organizing these farmers, and I say this as a person that's
As a
currently
farmer, yeah,
organizing
absolutely.
farmers. Blue Belly Farms is not just me. It's a collection of people that are practicing like practices with the same strains and providing the same kind of medicine. We're trying to circle wagons. One dynamic that other people from out of town might be able to attest to is if you've been in the business a long time, having been in this business a long time, you have to be a little bit more sketch and standoffish with other people because you've been burned so many times. And so when you've been burned time and time and time again, the idea of coming and collecting with all of these strange people is a very foreign concept because you've had to be able to kind of handle your own stuff, so to speak. So it's a very, very difficult wrangling, getting all of those intentions in the same area. And that's why a couple of billionaires could write bad legislation that would disqualify us, is because through CCHI or through all the other efforts that we couldn't get together any sane legislature because nobody could do exactly what you're talking about. So I understand that need, but it's a very difficult
It's hard.
task.
Building
Yeah.
community is very challenging.
Especially with those community players. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I totally agree.
Yeah.
Very cool. We're right up at the top of the hour. I want to give the audience an opportunity to engage with our panel. So we'll have about 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A. If you guys had anything that sparked your interest or something that you have a concern about in Santa Cruz, this is your time. Anyone? Questions?
Anybody?
I have one aspect that that came up, and that is in terms of the legislators that you're talking about forming all these laws. Have you got a cadre of people, advocates who are, promoting your ideas at that level, like people who can collectively get behind and get voted into office or support their fundraising or whatever you need to do to get that voice amped up in the legislature at the various levels of the state?
Yeah, and we will have a panel called The Future of Cannabis in Santa Cruz that will feature a couple of these groups, one being Green Trade. There's another group called Community Prevention Partners, which traditionally has actually been in opposition for cannabis, but they're actually in solidarity with regulating because their priority is youth prevention and harm reduction. And if you don't license people, well, they're just going back to the illicit market. Or if you don't have an ordinance that is permissive, the only other option, these people aren't going to stop growing. That's the reality. Some are, yeah.
You're right.
But that's the bottom line is there's either, a legit person in compliance with the local ordinance or someone that is not complying to anything that is going to do what they need to do to pay their bills. So maybe I'll give you guys an opportunity.
Just specifically, Green Trade Santa Cruz is a organization that's specifically doing what you're talking about. We align with local politicians, and we are active in the community promoting events that promote normalization and regulation of this plant.
You're definitely seeing a lot more lobbying efforts these days. There's organizations that have sprung up, including things like NCIA, which is the National Cannabis Industry Alliance, as well as the local groups that have been mentioned. So that is underway. It's definitely something that is going to take years to unfold. I like to say that legalization is a process and not an event. And many of these regulations are very well intentioned, but there's consequences that we didn't quite understand. So it's going to take some time to work through all those issues.
So working with women entrepreneurs and helping them to develop really strong businesses, one of the things that we recognize is a piece of it is activism. And there is a level of responsibility that you take on when you become a cannabis business that part of your job is also now to become an advocate, because if you don't, you could lose your business. If you're not out there actually participating in local and state legislation, your city could determine, we don't want you here anymore, bye-bye. So you cannot afford to be a passive participant in the cannabis industry. If you have a business, you have to learn how to be an advocate. How do you petition your city hall? How do you get bills passed on a local level? And it is a responsibility of every one of us in this industry, but not everybody is really taking seriously. So part of what we're trying to do is educate people on exactly how you go about that process, because it can be scary and intimidating, and it can feel like something that you'll never make a dent in, but you will if you continue to show up, if you continue to meet with your local legislators, if you go to Sacramento, if you do these things and participate and become a part of the system, and one by one we add more and more people and more business owners who are taking activism seriously, we will be able to steer things the way we want them to go in our favor. But if you are not active, you're becoming part of the problem.
I have a follow-up, just one follow-up, in that, just as a non-grower, non-business person, consumer only, just what I am is a voter. And
There you go.
there's an election coming up in November with a lot of people, a lot of seats. And I wanna know, I wanna be able to go somewhere and look up a list, put out by your official activist group.
That's a good idea.
That says, okay, in this county, at this level, this position, this is the one that will support our cannabis agenda.
What are you doing at 4 o'clock? Because this is happening currently. So
I
there's
can
a
promise you that from
yeah.
Green Trade.
There's Green Trade is the founder of Green Trade, or one of the co-founders, Pat, is going to speak and probably moderate our last panel. He's currently at a walk by block, get out the vote in solidarity with Felipe Hernandez, who is running for the 5th District supervisor position. And so, the idea here is to align with,
4th District.
I'm sorry, 4th District. Capit's district, which is Santa Cruz policy. And if we could help help a campaign effort of someone like Felipe Hernandez, who has been outspoken in support with our community, we could potentially have that majority vote on the board. We've seen 2 out of 5 articulate that the cannabis community is an ally. And then we saw 2 out of 5 too, that the other side of that. And then Capit was kind of the wish-washy. He kind of went with the flow of the day. So Felipe, if we can help get him on the board of supervisors, we'll start seeing county policy in a way that will support and fortify the Santa Cruz cannabis legacy of natural. CCOF is part of our legacy as a community, certified California organic farms, and Chadwick, and you look at the UC, we're all about natural earth stewardship. And if you look at WHAM and Measure A, we were 4 years ahead of Prop 215 as a community. So that's the thing here, is hopefully we can align with candidates and maybe even elect our own candidates as we become more engaged with the civic process, and as we can organize as operators and constituents. So right at the end here, and I want to give each one of you some quick final words and help the audience understand how they can follow and support your work.
Thank you for having us today, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Please check us out at bluebellyfarms.com. If you have any questions, it's a complete list of the things that we're doing in the Santa Cruz community to support cannabis. So thank you very much for your time.
My name is Elise McDonough. You can find me at elisemcdonough.com. I'm on all social media, ELISE MCD 420. On Instagram, I am Cannabis Edibles 420. So especially if you have any questions about cannabis edibles, I am happy to help you out in any way I can.
So you can find Kadin Academy, our membership academy, at Kadin, Kadin Academy.com. And if you are a woman interested in starting a business in cannabis or building a community with other women entrepreneurs in cannabis, you can find us at Women Entrepreneurs in Cannabis on Facebook. It is a closed group, but it is free. So feel free to join us there if you want to build a stronger community. And thank you very much, Chris, for having us. It's been a really great panel today.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let's get a family photo.
It's a very fast hour.
Goes fast. So just stay where you are. I just want to take a quick picture. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. We have some seats in here.
Okay.
John, will you do the honors?
Yes.
Oh, there's 2 Johns here. I was talking to this John.
He wins. He's better photographer. My hand's shaking.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'm just gonna kneel in front of the panel and they can just stay where they're
There
at.
you go.
Okay, sideways like this.
Sure.
1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you guys. Great, well, we're gonna transition. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Brian.
Good luck today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Good to see you. Thanks
I'll
for
stop
joining
by
us.
later.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. That's really good. Thank you for coming through.
Thanks, no
Of
problem.
course.
Thanks for asking.
Cool.
So yeah, Kara, I'd love to talk to you because I can really relate to what you're talking about in